So good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Jelana Sheets, and I, along with my colleagues, are delighted to welcome you to this month's Community Talk series hosted by Our Future is Science. The series is part of the Mentorship and Scholars Program of Our Future is Science, and we're happy to welcome the public as Zoom allows us to democratize these programs. OFIS is an initiative operated out of the Aspen Institute Science and Society program. As an organization, we are committed to sparking curiosity, passion, and confidence about STEM in young people to push science forward into the 21st century and solve society's most pressing issues. OFIS is generously supported by Genentech, the Carson Family Trust, the Manitou Fund, the Rita Allen Foundation, 3M, and Lyda Hill Philanthropies. The Community Talk series is a platform to expose individuals to diverse careers, as well as information, insights, and perspectives on the intersections of STEM disciplines and social justice issues. Now on to tonight's talks. We have our monthly talk here in April, and it will focus on artificial intelligence for all and looking at real-world algorithmic bias. And so I'll turn it over to my colleague, Hassan, who will introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, Joanna. So good evening, everyone. I extend a warm welcome to all of you as well. It's good to see mentors, mentees, and some ambassadors in the room. I'm also very thrilled to introduce our first speaker for tonight, Chris Hemphill. So Chris Hemphill, who focuses on how data science can help us understand and improve the human condition. They are a director of commercial intelligence at Wobot Health, a role that combines data science with AI strategy for health systems and insurers. This work at the intersection of tech and strategy has a broader theme, working with healthcare leaders to drive ethical and effective decisions with AI and algorithms. Hemphill's work in data ethics initiatives led to collaborations between Chicago Booth's Center for Applied AI and Reduced Racial and Gender Bias in Algorithms. Hemphill is currently a McSilver Fellow in residence. Their current focus is on engagement arcs and uncovering unseen population health needs in the digital mental health sector. They graduated from the University of South Alabama and have helped teach data science at General Assembly.
Hassan, thank you. And I just want to say I really appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to be here and talk to people who talk to you all who are might be forming your careers and more at the beginning of these journeys. I'll go ahead and share my slides, just give a little background here. But yeah, Hassan, you hit on the high notes better than me. But the focus is on data science within a healthcare context. And at Wobot Health, I don't know if you've ever used Wobot Health, say something in the chat, because it's something that we make free for all whenever you have any kind of a mental health need or need mental health assistance. It's a chat bot that you can talk about those challenges with. So what happens on the back end is that there's times that people are logging in, there's conversation patterns that we overall see. And my role in data science within Wobot is to understand what those journeys look like and help us better make decisions around the types of content, the types of mental health allyship that we develop for that platform. In addition to that, the NYU's McSilver Institute Fellowship, extremely honored to be a part of that program, and that came from the work that Hassan introduced that was focused on addressing algorithmic bias from a healthcare context. So overall, in this presentation, I know we only have a short amount of time, but really my goal was to talk about some of the things that we see. You know, AI is a hot topic right now. I did not like when I switched over to Wobot and got focused in this natural language processing space and everything like that. I was not aware that this year would come out to be what it was. So I have a feeling there's a lot of questions around AI and things like that. Feel free if there's any to speak up if there's anything that you've been wondering about. But I want to get past all the hype that we're seeing and introduce things that help make it accessible to understand, like if you want to take your career down the data science or AI path, provide some tools to do that, but also focus not on the doomism and hype and everything like that, but on the real ethical challenges that we're facing today. So honored to be a part of this. And fun fact, this musique macabre thing that you see, that's my YouTube channel where I read horror stories and play music at the same time. So along with the business part and everything like that, like I really love art and weird music and stuff like that. So if that's down your line, go follow me on YouTube. But anyway, kicking it off, this is this is what I want to dismantle, is that whenever we're told about AI, we're talking about these artificial intelligence algorithms, I see it in the news every day. New York Times, like they're anthropomorphizing these systems. They're making it sound like it's much bigger than what it actually is. And by focusing on this whole Terminator, I don't know how many people have seen Terminator 2, but the whole idea is like there's a artificial intelligence that turns its back on humanity and tries to destroy everything. When we focus on problems like that, when we're focused on a bunch of science fiction, it distracts us from the real problems that come from how we've embraced artificial intelligence today. Quickly, I want to go over some examples of that. One example that you may have heard about. Oh, there we go. Yeah. One example that you may have heard about is, like, again, artificial intelligence, data science, using these algorithms to make predictions about who people are and whether or not they should go back to jail for crimes and things like that, recidivism. This stuff is already in place today and in use today. So rather than focusing all of our attention on these far-fetched future issues, there's real issues. This is the person in this photo is Robert Williams, who was wrongly targeted by a facial detection algorithm system by police. So this led to this is an example of people getting an AI technology called facial detection, where this law enforcement agency was using this to identify who was what, like if there was a security footage where somebody has been seen committing a crime, it's meant to scrape social media, facial information, things like that, and match the person to that crime. Problem was, the person, Robert Williams, who got arrested, was not even in the same state as where that footage happened. A big problem, and there's a Dr. Timnit Gebru, there's a paper that she released back in 2018 called Gender Shades that focused on the point that these facial detection algorithms, these systems that police use, don't perform well on darker skin tones. So this is just an example of the types of problems that get ignored when we focus on all that doomism stuff. Another example is within healthcare. Obviously, I have a passion for that. I'm in healthcare data science. That's where my background is. But one thing that fuels the work that I do, honestly, like I'm down here right now because of a medical issue. I'm down here in Mobile, Alabama right now. Usually I'd be calling you from Atlanta, but there's a medical issue that my mother's been having, and it's been extremely difficult to navigate the healthcare system. Even behind me is a picture of my grandmother, who also had major difficulties navigating the healthcare system, being taken seriously when talking about her pain, and like being addressed by doctors. We know that there are systemic issues with our healthcare system that are biased against people who have less money, people who aren't a certain skin tone, and things like that. There's lots of evidence that shows the differences in whether or not doctors take Black woman patients seriously versus wealthier white patients. So what happens with that bias that people bring to the table in their careers is, if you're trying to make predictions about who has specific healthcare needs, who should be engaged in specific healthcare programs, well, the biases that are reflected, like if there is a whole swath of people that couldn't access the kind of care that they needed, there's a whole swath of people that didn't have that level of access. Well, that's going to be reflected in the data. So when you're trying to make predictions based on that data, it's a flawed data set, And one of the major results that happened, I can drop a link to this study from 2019, but there was a major medical system put forth a program for some of their sicker patients, but Black patients had to have 3 times the level of sickness, 3 times the level of comorbidities for the algorithm to recognize them. So those are the types of things that are happening today with artificial intelligence that we're not hearing enough about. And also in finance, I know that like eventually we want to get a loan for a car, get a loan for a house, or like have some sort of stable living situation. And it's even discriminatory, like the algorithms that they put in place in finance scenarios are discriminatory as well. And the stat that I have comes from a study that MIT did, which I can also provide a link to. So what's the common, what gave the answer away? What do all these cases have in common? Is that there are flawed decisions that are going through the process. I think a lot of those flawed decisions come from the fact that, when we say artificial intelligence, when we talk about the people that develop these algorithms, typically lots of people with PhDs, great solid research backgrounds, well-moneyed institutions and everything like that. We think that the people working on this stuff must be addressing all of these very specific issues. And it's clear that when these kinds of things, these errors that you see are all preventable if we go through and we start looking at the subgroups that we're focused on, when we start looking at how algorithms impact our people. But without the knowledge about the flaws in these algorithms, it's just not getting addressed. So a big case I wanted to make here, and I don't have a huge amount of time, but I just wanted to talk about some of the things that go behind effective AI decisions. So a process that we use, and again, this same process that I'm presenting here today is the same thing I would discuss with a major healthcare system or somebody that I'm advising on using AI. So, and the way that you want to focus your AI efforts and to determine what algorithms to put in place is to first focus on a particular business outcome that you're, and again, I deal with a lot of health systems and things like that. So I'll talk specifically, you can use this framework for anything, but you want to think about the outcome that you're trying to generate. So with a hospital system, a hospital may be interested in driving more revenue by growing by growing its cardiology service line, for example. So you think about the outcome that you want, and so from that, the question then becomes, okay, so what kind of artificial intelligence do we have to put in place? What kind of prediction do we have to make to help drive that outcome? So an example of that, again, within a hospital system context, is who's most likely to need and use cardiology services. So then you're working backwards. So and I'm saying this because a lot of people operate without understanding the context that they're operating in. I'm trying to bring that to the table at a young age. I want that to be there forever as you pursue your careers in data science or what have you. So then you're thinking about your final step is to think about what data it takes to generate those predictions. Like I referred to earlier, the data that you're acquiring, that kind of tells you what you're able, like what kinds of things you're able to predict. If I get things like past healthcare visits, things like the past instances in which a population tried to improve their care, then that's a data set that might have some use in predicting that cardiology volume. That all sounds good from a pure business perspective, but what all of these are missing are ethical checkpoints along the way. And these are ethical checkpoints that any data science or any healthcare leader, any team should be employing these ethical checkpoints to go along with the business context that they're focused on. So needed data, went over this a little bit earlier, is that, hey, if we're identifying this needed data, we need to understand the biases that might exist within that data. If our services, if our healthcare services are unaffordable to certain groups of people, we're not going to see them reflected in the data, and then everything that we do is going to perform much more poorly on that group. Then there's the question of what you're predicting. There's a whole host of things I could have included here, such as like, do we have consent to use the data for like predictive purposes and research purposes and things like that? But one major output focus, and you can tell they missed it in each of those examples that I brought, is fine tuning to understand, does this algorithm underperform on Latino or Asian or Black individuals? Like looking not just at the overall, we're really happy about this model performance, but looking at how it performs on various subgroups. Without people in the room asking those questions and being aware, those questions don't get asked. And then the final point is like to be really effective in understand, like to lead in ethical programs, is understanding the context of even the problem that you're identifying itself. Because what if you you've got the data right, all balanced properly across all these groups, you got your predictions right, but the outcome is actually something that perpetuates bias as well. Those are the types of questions that you should be asking, not just of the algorithm itself, but of the business that it's employed in. So rather than focusing on increasing cardiology service volume, for example, there could be a better focus on driving population health goals and things like that. So just wanted to run us through that. I should have done it a little bit more interactive, but I wanted to just run through those that kind of thinking process for effective AI and ethics decisions. A couple of things that I want you to leave with is, if you're interested in pursuing down these pathways, we'll talk about outside of pursuing education, college, and things like that. Some things that you can focus on right now are to learn the basics first. So learning about statistics, learning about machine learning. There's all kinds of resources online, and the one that I recommend the most is Data Quest, just because it's a hands-on way to start working with data sets, getting a feel for these types of problems, and at the same time reading reading things that are accessible, non-technical, but kind of explain some of the issues that happen with data itself. Honestly, this is very similar to the way that I picked it up. I did a coding boot camp for data science, and at the same time, I just heard a podcast where Kathy O'Neill was talking about her book, Weapons of Math Destruction, and it was non-technical, so you don't have to know all this Python statistics stuff for it to be effective for you. And it's a good primer on AI issues in gender, race, democracy, and things like that. Once you've got a little bit more Python, a little bit more of a grounding, this book, Data Conscious, I'm actually in the middle of it right now. But Dr. Brandis Hill Marshall, follow her wherever you can. Follow her on LinkedIn, Twitter, or what have you, because she is spreading the word about ethics in data platforms. But she's also extremely practical in how to solve it. So you start getting that more technical grounding. This has a lot of use cases and a lot of explanation on software engineering and data science decisions that might lead to poor ethical outcomes. And also, once another thing to focus on, once you've got that Python or like basic data science skills grounded, fast.ai. This is another majorly important free learning resource. It's put together by Jeremy Howard and Dr. Rachel Thomas, and these two people have actually been extremely influential in some of the algorithms that are far and wide in use today. But they have a complete dedication to make sure that all their learning resources on things like deep learning, natural language processing, computer vision, that stuff is all available free online. You just need a little bit of Python knowledge to start working with it. And they always have that focus on data ethics. So I just wanted to bridge that gap between like understanding that business strategy component, understanding the ethical implications, and getting some grounding on how to get the basics down. So with that, if there's any questions, I know we have some time at the end. I want to hand it over to Mutale.
Oh, this was wonderful. Thank you so much, Chris, for kind of like laying the foundation within the context of your work in the healthcare and mental health space, and then just giving some additional context around what bias in AI looks like as well. And so now I'll introduce our next speaker, Mutale Nkonde. Mutale is an AI policy advisor and founder and CEO of AI for the People, a nonprofit that seeks to use popular culture to increase support for policies to reduce algorithmic bias. Nkonde led the advocacy for the introduction of the Algorithmic Accountability Act to the US House of Representatives in 2019 and testified in support of the act to the House Commerce and Energy Committee when the act was reintroduced in 2022. In 2023, Nkonde was named as one of the top 10 leading women in AI by NASDAQ and Two Sigma Ventures, and one of the top 100 technologists to watch by Women Who Code. AI for the People is currently providing input for the forthcoming UN Declaration for the Rights of People of African Descent, in which they are advocating for freedom from algorithmic bias, should be a basic human right. Nkonde is a member of the TikTok Content Moderation Advisory Board, a columnist of msmagazine.com, and a much sought after speaker and media commentator. So welcome.
Thank you for that, Dr. Sheets. And it's so funny, but because whenever somebody introduces me, I'm always like, wow, you did all of that? That sounds amazing. And it was. So I'm going to do a number of different things in this talk. First of all, I'm going to introduce myself and how I created this job, because I always remind people that I am way older than I look. So the first time I ever sent an email, I was actually at the end of my first year in college. So the fact that I work in AI and other advanced technologies is really interesting, because I am not a hard science person. I am somebody that loved history, that loved English, that loved anthropology, and was able to really use those subjects to start AI for the People. So for any of you in the audience that are like, I think I'm interested in technology, but I definitely do not like math and statistics, and I definitely do not see myself in there, I'm definitely somebody that can show you another entryway, and also speak about my own career to give you more understanding. So AI for the People, as you know, is the organization that I lead, and we do a number of different things. But one of the areas we're really interested in is the fate of Black people online. And this comes from a time when I was at Google. So after I left school, I actually went into media and culture, which is why I still work in popular culture. And one of the things that always really interested me was how Black people were being shown on television and film. That's mostly now happening in social media. And the way that that happens in social media actually shapes our world. So we use social media as a way to talk about algorithms, because most of us have it on our phones. And most of us don't realize that as we post to social media sites and information comes up, there are all of these systems going on in the back end to make decisions about the type of experience that we have. So these are called algorithms, which are just instructions of how to make sure what you post on social media gets posted and then out to your friends. And they go through a flow chart, something like this. I am not going to go into this in depth. I can talk about it later, but I just want to kind of leave you with the idea that whenever you are using social media, there is this back end response. Usually, people think that what we post is what we see, and the stuff that we see is what our friends see. But one of the things that's come up in the news recently is how social media has been bad actors, so people that want to bully on social media, people that want to change the way that you behave, can actually buy ads to do this. And I know many of you are not voting age yet, but I hope that many of you are close, and when you get to that age that you will vote. One of the things that has come up in the United States really over the last 7 years is the idea that people can buy ads to change the way that you vote, and that's specific to Black people. So that's actually something that came up in 2016. And it was the Russian government at the time that were pretending to be Black people online. And the reason they were pretending to be Black people online was so that we would behave in ways that weren't good for us. And one of the sites, as you can see here, was called the Blacktivist. It pretended to be a Black Lives Matter site. And what it was actually trying to do was to stop people from taking part in the election. The way this fits to my personal story was because I was already in journalism, media, and entertainment, I was really interested in creating messages in TV that would make people move a particular way. But because when you work in TV or film, there are rules, there are laws about what we can show and how we can show it, we were kind of forced to protect the public in ways that social media companies just do not, which is how I kind of found my way in policy. And that was through a job that I got at Google, where I was looking at policy and then eventually came out on my own. So the reason that these Russian, some of them were bots, some of them weren't, but the reason that these Russian forces were pretending to be Black people in line was, number one, there were no rules against it. Number two, they were using advertising. And number three, they were trying to deceive and manipulate Black people. And this was really one of the many ways that I started to think about technology and working in AI, not just looking at the technology, but also thinking about racial justice, because I was beginning to see, and others were beginning to see, that the poor treatment of Black people in real life can be replicated online. And so who are those people that, number one, recognize it, number two, will speak on it, and number three, will try and create rules and regulations to stop that happening? And that's how AI for the People came to be. So one of the big lies that was told at that time that I'm describing is this idea that people who were Black were not really Black. So one of the people that came under attack, this actually happened a couple of years later, but it had started in 2016, was Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris has an Indian parent, also has a Jamaican parent, and they were saying that she is not Black based on the fact that both of her parents are not of African descent, but she specifically wasn't Black American. This is where my history majors, this is where my social science people come into play. Because for people that do not understand how race and racism work in America, they may think, well, she probably isn't Black, and she probably isn't Black, and then believe those messages and then kind of get down this rabbit hole where they're not voting and, you know, they're falling into QAnon and conspiracy theories. Or you have people working in technology who have the social science background needed to understand the impact of the algorithmic systems that are being created. And I am one of these people. So when that problem was brought to us, we were able to take our partners through a version of what I'm about to show you here. So we started out with this provocation of, is Kamala Harris really Black? This is what the Russian government were trying to split Black communities over. And we introduced them to a legal convention called the One Drop Rule. And I'm not sure if you know, but after slavery ended and before the civil rights movement, there was this period in American history, particularly in the South, called Jim Crow. And one of the ways that they would control who got access to services was deciding whether the person was Black or not. And if they were Black, you couldn't have access. And if you were white, you could. That's broadly the way that it worked. And they used this thing called the One Drop Rule, and they encoded it into laws. And what it said was that if you had one Black ancestor, you were Black, and you therefore could not get access. So once we had introduced these teams, these were engineering teams, policy teams, and media teams, to this One Drop Rule, we were then able to say, by that distinction, Kamala Harris is Black. So what we're seeing on social media cannot be true. The second thing we did, just to reinforce that, was look for other other examples where this has happened. And I'm sure those of you writing high school essays already know that when you make an argument in an essay, you, number one, have to show your evidence. So I just talked about the laws with the one drop rule, but you often then have to illustrate that. And now this is a portrait of George Washington, the white man on the left, and the black man on the right is his ancestor. And that we use that to prove that just because George Washington had a black ancestor, it did not make that ancestor any less black based on the one drop rule. And I said George Washington, I'm sorry, I meant Thomas Jefferson. This is his ancestor. So we use that then to relate back that Kamala Harris, based on those two things, are black. And then we had to start thinking about, then we had to start taking these engineering teams and other teams through, why was it that they did not know that? Why was it the people that are mostly creating these technologies who are not diverse? In 2018, for example, only 2.5% of Google's workforce was Black. I was one of those people. I left very soon after that, and only 4% at Microsoft and Facebook. And then if we fast forward to 2023, it's actually even less because they've had layoffs. And one of the things that my research team found at the time was that there was this lack of a thing called racial literacy. So racial literacy is this idea that whenever you're learning something, there are three elements to learning. There's cognitive, so what do we know? What knowledge do we have? There's the emotional, how do we relate to that knowledge? I know that when I was first getting into tech and people were saying to me things like, learn to code, do math, do those things, emotionally, my spirit does not jive with mathematics. And so I did not know that that's something I could do. And it wasn't until I was introduced to all of the other jobs that take place in technology, the business jobs, the policy jobs, the communications jobs, the community jobs, the brand partnerships, all of these other jobs, that I realized that there was a place for me, and that was a lot better for my spirit. And so I felt like I wanted to do it more. And then the third part of learning is, what do you do with this information? So as we were talking to social media companies and other interested parties, one of the things that we said to them was, the reason that mis and disinformation, which is what I've been describing, these lies that go on online, are allowed to spread, is because cognitively, people are not thinking about social media technologies as technologies that can be manipulated. They think when we post to social media, the social media is completely safe. It's completely safe because it's a technology and it's math, and there's nothing, you can't do anything to math. It's right or it's wrong. That is not the case. And then emotionally, this idea that we are safe enables us to be tricked. So if you've ever been online and you've seen something that says, I think about this because I get trolled online, and there was one group of folks trolling me, and they would always be like, you're just ugly and nobody will love you, and I was like, first of all, let's face it, no one's ugly over here, disinformation. But you can also make me feel that that's true, because what the algorithm is doing within social media is feeding me much, much more of that content. So it makes me feel like everything I see online is true because I'm seeing it a lot. That's not the case. I've already told you up here, social media can be manipulated, right? So we have to think about it critically. And then the last thing is, how do we respond to that? How do we use our education about what we know to decide how we're going to integrate, how we're going to navigate social media systems and other technical systems? And then what rules do we put in place to make sure that those systems are not just safe for me or Chris or whomever, but are safe for everybody on the internet, which is everybody in the world. And those three elements are called racial literacy. And what my colleagues and I did was write a number of papers that advocated for this and said that it should be brought in tech, and people loved it. So that's the report. So in order for my career to move forward, I have always been very clear in going into social media teams and asking them, what do they know to be true of the world around them? Because once we realize what we know to be true, then we know the type of systems that are being built. Are those systems that are good to Black people? Are those systems that are good to women? Are those systems that are good to girls? Or are these systems that protect some people, as is the case in social media, and don't protect others? And do we accept that? One of the ways that we build these frameworks is by looking at information systems of the past. So this is W.E.B. Du Bois. He is one of the most preeminent Black scholars in the world, specifically first Black person ever to get a PhD from Harvard. And in the 30s, he had done a number of visualizations around Black life. And the reason he did these visualizations was to show white America that Black people were completely normal, completely true, completely whole people. But the way he used visualizations are very much in the same way that we think about designing the outer systems of social media today. It's something called UX. Definitely in question and answer, ask me all the jobs that are not coding in tech, and I can talk to you about them and how you get them. But he, even back then in the 1930s, had really left us with a model of how to create systems that transmit information in ways that are visual, but also do not harm Black people. So I charged some of the teams to do that work. This is Marcus Garvey. He is a Black freedom fighter. One of the things that was really interesting about him when we spoke to teams about Garvey was the way in which he was able to use rhetoric. So if you think about writing on social media, that is a form of composition. It is a rhetorical art, right? We're writing to each other, we're texting each other, and we can use that to transmit ideas. So we can transmit the idea Black Lives Matter, put a hashtag on top of it. We can also transmit toxic ideas. I'm not going to go over them. So when we were talking about Garvey, we were talking about the importance of speech and making sure that we regulate speech, because speech is powerful. I'm going to start to click a little bit faster because this particular slide has a lot of pictures, and I can speak more about the other pictures, but you can get the idea that as somebody that was coming from the social sciences and helping engineers not just build better technologies, but companies market better technologies, speaking to rule makers and policymakers about the fact that we've done this before, I was able to use my education in Black history to really lay out different ways of tech being designed by looking at the talents, the breadth of talent from lots of different types of people, not just a small subset of white engineers who typically go to MIT or Harvard or Stanford. That's not a problem, but it's a very specific type of knowledge base that doesn't allow for products to be safe for other people. So I'm not going to go through everybody. You can ask about them later, but we found all the Black folks everywhere, including Rihanna, and Obama can talk about that later. So the last thing that we talked about in our work with social media is, as these algorithms are being developed, we know that information online that makes us angry is more likely to be spread. Y'all are probably too young, but I'm old enough to remember World Star Hip Hop on social media, and it was just a bunch of Black people fighting all the time. That stuff went viral because psychologically, we are wired to connect to anger. We are wired to share anger, and we're not wired to share love. So one of the things that, one of the provocations AI for the People has whenever we're talking to rule makers is, what would it be like to create an internet that protects and uplifts Black women? what rules would we have to have in place? What words would we allow? How would we regulate that? And use that as a way to think about how do we design systems from a social perspective. Twitter has got definitely worse over the last year since Elon Musk had it, but even back in the day, we would charge them with a better Twitter, a Twitter for democracy, a Twitter for freedom, a Twitter for love. And then lastly, as I end my talk, and I'm so excited to speak to you, is that we need you. We need the energy of your generation, the ideas that you bring forward. I was able to start a tech career really on vibes. The first job I got in the tech industry was because somebody asked me if I wanted to be on a team that was trying out this new thing called Twitter. And that was in 2008. I don't even know if you all were born in 2008, but at that point, me just merely saying yes to that question completely changed my life. Those types of pathways don't exist in tech anymore, but what does exist are the people who are the most curious, the people who ask the most questions, and the people who really understand society and really understand Black people are always going to have a home within the tech industry, because there are so many engineers making all the same types of products, getting into all the same types of problems, and we can be the answer. And I hope that you all, or at least some of you, can join me in my work in trying to create a tech sector where AI isn't just for some people, but AI is for all people. Thank you. I'm done.
I struggle to
you
find the
so much.
unmute button. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, what do I do? Do I do something?
Nope, you're all fine.
So,
So thank you
continue
both.
on.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Jelana. So thank you both to Chris and Mutale for a wonderful laying of the foundation for today's exploration into artificial intelligence and bias. We have some updates for the mentees and the mentors after the community talk, so please stay on for about 5 minutes after we're done tonight. Now that that's done, we can now jump into the Q&A. Chris, you've done such a wonderful job answering some of the questions that have been provided. Therese had a question for Mutale. So Therese, would you like to ask that?
Yeah, my question was, sorry, I'm pulling it up. Okay. Do you think the relationship between legislation and online moderation is one like issue that is difficult to address, especially in America under like the American Constitution?
I do, and I think that people get such a wrong understanding of the Constitution. And the Constitution was written very much to make sure that the gains of slavery would be equally distributed. So I don't know that it should be the base document by which we decide whether we can regulate or not. But when we speak about freedom of speech, that's the freedom to criticize government. It is not the freedom to go on the internet and make people's lives more dangerous. And there have been some global studies that we've been involved with at AI for the People, along with Amnesty International, where we found that Black women were 84% more likely to experience online hate than people from any other group. And that increases if you consider Black trans women. So when we look at speech moderation, we're thinking about the protection of basic human rights and civil rights that we already have within this country. And we urge companies and legislators to not shy away from this idea that we should have a healthy online environment, because they're protecting a misreading of our constitutional rights. And so I sit on the TikTok content advisory board. And one of the things I'm always really strong about is that TikTok isn't the government, and therefore it shouldn't take on the Constitution, and these companies are global. So to take on the US Constitution is really, really short-sighted, because how does that relate to the 75% of social media users that sit outside of the United States?
Thank you. And then for Chris, would you like to elaborate on any of the questions that you may have answered in the chat or provide maybe some new insight?
Yeah, happy to do so. And Mutale, fantastic presentation. Just wanted to thank you for that. Like my eyes were raised the whole time. So it's awesome to see those different pockets of expertise. And one thing I was asked about by Jelana was to elaborate a little bit on just the various pathways down towards a data science career, like for especially for people that might be interested in like the programming and algorithmic development yourselves. Like personally, my background, like Mutale mentioned, those people from MIT and like those various people that get into these vaunted positions. My path was different. It was based on I developed a lot of subject matter expertise around sales operations. So I had more of a data and sales career at first, but because I was interested in like it was a sales operations at a healthcare technology company, but I was interested in questions that you couldn't answer with the traditional tools that you have in that role. So it was just really like, hey, how do we better understand what hospital systems need and how to direct our team's efforts towards those hospitals. So honestly, I took a class, this was back in 2018, took a class with a coding boot camp called General Assembly, where they had a data science course. But for people that are interested in that, whether whether you're focusing on going down the traditional college route or going down the master's route or going down the coding boot camp route, I think the most important thing in that transition was understanding the types of problems that you want to solve and starting to work on those and put that kind of work out publicly. So a lot of the focus during that time was on data sets at the company that I was working on that I was working at. By working on those data sets, and Mutale, you probably have so much deeper examples. Like I'm just providing one pathway, but working on those data sets within healthcare, like kind of gave the expertise, gave the understanding beyond just the theoretical stuff that I was being taught in the boot camp. Like by solving real problems for these companies and for these healthcare systems, that's how I ultimately developed that profile. So I could go deeper in terms of like networking and things like that I think are necessary for that kind of career growth, but wanted to emphasize that if the Ivy Leagues aren't on the radar, that doesn't mean that you can't have a career in AI. So just thought that would be fun to highlight.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think everybody that works in tech, whether you're in a technical role or whether you're in a non-technical role, everybody has to be a very high level problem solver. So I will give you an example. I did not prepare my presentation until 2 minutes before you got here, but I knew how to solve that problem because I knew that I had done something like this before. I knew that I was speaking to high school students. I knew what slides to keep in and what slides to take out, and I was ready to go and present. That is a set of skills that come with the fact that I'm already an organized person. I already know how to make directions, and I always deliver. Those are three soft skills that are absolutely pivotal to any career in tech. And what was so interesting about my path is I did come from an elite educational experience where I was trained to think critically. And that critical training meant that I could do anything. It really didn't matter that I wasn't writing the code if I knew how to interpret the results. So for anyone who, if you are a quick thinker, then this is a career for you. And if you're interested in working at the intersection of racial justice or algorithmic bias, as I do, it really, Chris started to talk about this, but it really is just finding who are the other people doing that work, and how can you, are you going to follow them on Twitter? Are you going to read their books? Are you going to come to talks like this? Are you going to go back and speak to your mentors and figure it out? But once you find your tribe, the way jobs travel in tech is all informal. Somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, and then you get a job. But you have to get ready, so that you have to stay ready so that you don't have to get ready.
I want to comment, Mutale, like on the experience of like you generated that presentation, and one thing that you said was like, I don't waste time on being worried about this. So not a tear was shed, not a minute was wasted on catastrophizing. And I know it's hard to avoid catastrophizing, but it was just awesome to see that, and I hope that people learn like, hey, like. My thought was like, if I didn't have this presentation ready, then we could just have a conversation. Like there's always an alternative that you can be focused on versus just being in that moment spiraling.
I think that's great insight from both of you. Really lovely conversation. Edward, you have really good comment, but I don't think it's a question. I do have a question for both of you in the meantime. So this is kind of like maybe a chicken and the egg scenario, but I just wanted to get your thoughts. I know that like different social media apps, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Tumblr, like all these spaces have different personalities or different behaviors. Is that because of the way that users interact with the platform, or is that due to the way the platform allows users to interact with each other? Are those communities built kind of just due to the way that the system is, or is that due to the people who are interacting with it?
It depends how many people download it first. So all of these companies are trying to get users, and a platform that may start with one idea of who their user is and how they behave will change if other people come on it and then they make it into something different. So I can speak about TikTok specifically. So TikTok was a company that was Musically. Like, did anyone here ever use Musically? Okay, so you remember Musically back in the day? You be dancing, they be dancing, and you know how now on TikTok, you be dancing, they be dancing. It's because it's the same company. Just one person bought it from another person. And one of the things that TikTok has had to really fight against, specifically around election times, I personally am interested in the movement of power and technology. So I tend to look at how people use use technology around elections. But one of the things that TikTok decided was that it didn't really want to be a platform where people are coming and fighting about who to vote for in any country, right? It's in every country in the world. And so what they did was use their algorithms, that flow chart that I showed you about how it helps you think about your experience on your platform, so that when people were posting a lot about elections and candidates, it just doesn't get to your For You page. And in that decision, that policy then changes your experience on the platform. So you might be in an election where everybody's talking about this person or that person, but when you go on TikTok, you're seeing a bunch of people dance. That's the combination of engineering and policy. And that's very much where my expertise sit. And the same for Pinterest. Is Pinterest a thing? Do people? Okay.
Raise your hands in the chat, maybe, if you guys use
Yeah,
Pinterest.
I just did not have time in life for Pinterest, so I don't really know what people are pinning, but Pinterest when people were the business people were like, well, what do people want? Oh, they want to make lists online, so we're going to make it a pinning thing. So the modality is pin, right? Or you might have, is Clubhouse still a thing?
I don't think so.
Surprisingly.
Oh,
Or it might be people talking, or and. So a short way of answering that is you're looking at who's going to use it because it's a business. Then you're looking at how can we be different and how can we get people to keep using it.
Thank you. Chris, do you have any thoughts?
I was here for Mutale's thoughts, honestly. I my own personal use of social media, I'm on the receiving end of seeing how they've crafted those algorithms and form the conversations they want to. If you've been looking at Twitter, pre and post Musk, there's a prime example. Sorry for that gut punch that happened to you a few months ago, Mutale. I'm just gonna say it. My favorite lately is LinkedIn.
People are so professional
Yes.
and they don't tell you anything about their life, which is how I like it.
Yeah. Like we save that part for dinner and IRL. Like on LinkedIn, like there's an example of like Twitter, you're protected by the anonymity, whereas LinkedIn, there's a professional context. And again, earlier was like about finding your tribe. I'm going to just reemphasize Dr. Brandis Marshall, who wrote that book, Data Conscience. Follow her and see who's following and commenting on her stuff. Like use her network to your advantage when building your tribe and curating your experience.
Right. Thank you both for wonderful, wonderful time. I've really enjoyed myself. I know I say it all the time, but I truly did enjoy myself again. I'm going to pass it on to Ebony to do our closing. Edward, I know you had a good question in the chat, so if someone's able to answer it in the meantime, that would be great. If not, we'll just continue with the closing. And Ebony, the floor is yours.
Did you mean to answer out loud or just
in the chat, please?
Okay, cool.
So thank you. We're very grateful to Mutale Nkonde and Chris Hemphill for spending this evening with us. And to our audience, please extend your appreciation to our speakers in the chat. And thank you all for attending this community talk. Please visit our website, ourfutureisscience.org, and follow us on social media to learn about our initiative and future events and our educational campaign. Mentors and mentees, please do not log off yet. We have a few minutes devoted to you for you to ask us some questions. And don't forget to complete the attendance form in the chat. Thank you very much. This was a great experience tonight.
It was.
All right, since we won't have